everyone's story is going to look different. Everyone's recipe for getting to where they're going is going to look different. But I think, and again, kind of reverting back to what I spoke to earlier about giving talks, about doing what both you and I have done, which is flip the table on our freaking life and every bit of security and going full in after something. That is a way. That is a way. And there's the world of and. We are able to also operate in the world of and, which is doing that. And if there is something else that will allow you to, without, like you said, without squashing you or taking up too much of your time, but if you can find that sweet spot of having something that allows you to maintain that level of security so that you can build what you're building from a more pure place, like, hell yeah, man.
Welcome to the Travel Not to Escape podcast. I'm your host, Jolene on the Go, solo female traveler and creative entrepreneur. Think of me as your skydive instructor, empowering you to take the leap into solo travel to push past your fears and transform your life. Join me every Tuesday as we explore the world of solo travel with purpose and discover how you can use it for your personal transformation, learn how to make meaningful connections around the world, and reignite your spirit of play. We aren't just talking about traveling to find ourselves anymore. We're all about doing the work to understand who we authentically are, breaking through our limiting beliefs, and taking the leaps to manifest lives we are excited about. Through interviews, solo episodes, and meditations, each episode is packed with practical tips, strategies, and inspiring stories from guests who have transformed their lives through solo travel. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just starting out on your journey, the Travel Not to Escape podcast is here to inspire and empower you to solo travel with purpose. Strap on your helmet. We're about to jump headfirst into the journey of a lifetime. Are you ready? Let's go. Hey there, my beautiful navigators. Very quickly before we dive into today's episode, I want to ask you a question. You've been listening to these episodes for a while now, and I'm sure the thought has come into your mind of maybe I can go too. And if you have been itching to go on your own solo travel trip, but you still feel that nagging self-doubt hold you back, then let me help you break free from all of those doubts and embrace your solo travel journey. I'm excited to share. I have 5 open spots for this month to work with me one-on-one on your solo travel confidence. What does this look like? So, we're going to meet together for 4 sessions and go over exactly what's holding you back and create strategies to overcome those fears. Review your itinerary to make sure it's optimized for the transformation that you want to have and that it's safe and aligned with your values and your needs for connection. And we'll create your confidence toolkit so you'll have all the tools and resources that you need to address these concerns and challenges and things that might arise, such as language barriers, navigation, anxieties. And lastly, we're going to meet after your trip is over for a reintegration session, and we'll go over all of the lessons that you learned and make sure that you incorporate all of those learnings back into your life so you can return and become the version of you that you want to be. So if you're ready to transform your uncertainty to empowerment, book your free session with me now and let's get you on this confidence building journey together. The link is travelnottoscape.com/confidence and will also be in the show notes. Now let's dive into today's episode. Welcome, Travel Not to Escape navigators. I'm so excited to have my guest, Lindsey Dukes, here today. Lindsey is the founder of the Medicine Connective, and she is an experienced curator. She's an avid world traveler, adventurer, and she's been trained in heartwork, breathwork, and meditation facilitation. And I'm really, really excited to dive into her story. She's done so much change and risk and transformation in her life, and it's been a while since we've even chatted one-on-one. We met in 2018 in person in Austin, and that's where she's at right now. I'm currently in the Philippines, and we have so much to catch up on. Thank you so much for coming on, Lindsey.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. And I know your story is going to resonate with so many people. Like, it still is one of the things that resonates with me from when you told me that story. And it's like, oh my God, like someone's doing these big changes. Like, I can too. Like, it's okay. Right. So, okay, before we dive into all of that, I want to chat and ask you a question about play. And this helps me get to know my guests a little bit more better in a fun way. And so, what is or was your favorite childhood activity?
So I was an only child. Um, and I'm double Gemini Sagittarius rising, so I'm just
Ooh.
like air and fire and wondering. So honestly, we lived on a street that dead end, and I guess I was born in '86, so it was still like safe for us to just go play. And my dad would whistle when it was time to come home, right? So my favorite
Oh,
thing
wow.
to do, whether we were at home or like traveling somewhere, my parents would let me roam. So I used to love like just wandering out into the forest and collecting like sticks and rocks, or like bringing things to make
Ooh.
potions with. Or I had what my mom called my treasure drawer in my room that was just really full of a lot of random shit, like rocks and sticks and leaves. And it's hilarious now that like not much has changed. Like I still just love to wander around and collect things. But really, to answer your questions, like anything that required imagination, like pretend time, like yes. But yeah, just being outside and wondering.
Okay, so a few things are coming up for me right now. Lore. So there's 8 different play styles, and it's really cool to understand what your play style, your play personality is, and it's one of the ways that I help people reintegrate play back into their life. Right, like let's touch back into that inner child, what lit you up when you were younger, and let's find
Love
those
it.
similar types of things as adults. And so as you're talking, definitely the exploration play style. I think that that's a common theme with solo travelers specifically, of course, because we're traveling because we love it and we are lit up
Right.
with it. So you are an explorer. But the other two things that I love to see as well, and I've only had one other person on with this play style, is a collector play style. And she's actually also a holistic healer. So I wonder
Um,
if there's something there.
Probably. It's like
Yeah,
returning to
'cause
our roots.
yes, exactly. Like she loved collecting insects and like studying the insects that she would find on her explorations while she was wandering around outside as well. But you
So
also
fun.
you mentioned the imagination, which is a little bit of a storyteller. So you kind of have a combination, a beautiful tapestry of storytelling, exploration, and collector, collector of experiences, curator of experiences, right? So this all makes sense for you.
Hi, I'm the smile on my face is huge right now. I'm like, oh my God, this is totally manifested in my adult life. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
and
that you
that's the thing
started
is
with
like,
that question.
yeah, because we are already who we are when we're born, and
100%.
this like everything that we live through on top of that, all the expectations, all the pressures, those are the things that like disconnect us from ourselves. And so in this
Conditioning.
path,
Yep.
yeah, this path of transformation is so important. Let's get back in touch to who that little person, little
That's
child was
step
that
one.
enjoyed.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. And then let's
Burn it
see,
all down
is
so you
your
can remember who you are.
exactly. Is your life similar to what made you light up when you were younger? And it seems like for you, after all of the changes, you're there.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into those changes. I've been teasing those
Let's
changes
do it.
for a while. Okay, so let's dive
Let's
in.
do it.
What was your just give me a little bit of a background on like where you grew up, initially where you're from, and then how you started solo traveling.
Totally. So the short version, because the storyteller really comes out strong sometimes, and I can give you every detail, and I forget that not everybody needs or wants that. It's not necessary to the story. So born and raised in Texas, lived in a really small town during some of the formative years, like 12 to 18. We lived in the big town of Caldwell, Texas, on a big cattle ranch. And like looking back, it's beautiful now, but at that time as a teenager, I was just I could not freaking wait to get out of this stupid small town and go do something cool. So the day that I could move into dorms at Texas State, I did. So that's where I went to university. Graduated in 3 years, not to overachieve. I just didn't want to go home to my hometown
Yeah.
during the breaks or summer. So I just never
Mhm.
stopped going to school. Um, and then it's almost like from that point on, life didn't slow down for the next 10 years. I hopped straight into corporate America at 21 because I graduated like days after I turned 21. Went straight into
Wow.
corporate America, bought my first house at 23, was married by 24, Like, I didn't just want to check the boxes on the checklist. I wanted to check them faster than anybody else and
Yeah.
do all these things, right? It's just, yeah. So I took this beautiful list that's like laid out for us, especially in the Western world, and did it, all of it, and did it well and did it quickly. And
In
so
like
I
3
did all
years.
of these. Yeah. Well, yeah. So all of it just very quickly. I just wanted to do everything by the book. And so it's like I'm blowing through life. I'm, making great money in my 20s, like more than I
Mhm,
should have been making at the time. And then by 28, 29, I found myself sitting on the kitchen floor one night. My husband wasn't home, and I was like, why am I working this job that I don't love by any means?
mhm,
Is it to buy all of the shit in this house? Like, why do I even need all the things in
mhm,
this house? Is it just to keep up with or impress my friends? And it was like, do I even really like these friends,
mhm,
or are they just people that I've known for the last, 10
mhm.
years? And so those just are my friends. And I was like, oh shit. And I was like, do I even like my husband? And I was like, oh my God. Like,
Oh,
it was just like this series of internal questioning by myself on the kitchen floor one night. And the answer was like, obviously, my internal like self was just like, no, 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 no,
no.
no. And I
Mhm.
was just like, oh God, oh God,
Oh,
what do I do? Because it was very obvious for me in that moment that I was not living a life that was in full alignment with what I should be doing. I didn't know
mhm,
what the hell what I should be doing was, but I was very clear in that moment that whatever I was doing wasn't it. And I imagined myself continuing to live that exact life for the next, 20 to 40 years. And I was like, there
mhm.
has to be more to life than this. Like, this is garbage.
Yeah.
I won't do this for the rest of my life. I was like, okay, so I can either, I don't know if you want to edit this out. Like, I could either smoke a bowl and go to bed and pretend like I didn't just have this very, very real conversation with myself, or I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to do something. And
Mhm,
so it was almost like I just had this super clear moment after getting very real with myself there on the kitchen floor, just through tears. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew what I was not going to do. And it was continue doing any of those things that I was currently
wow.
doing in my life. And so over the next year and a half, it was almost as though if I was not brave enough to leave one of those things, it was kindly plucked from my path. And so
Oh,
over the next year and a half, so between 28 and a half and 30, I left my marriage. I left my house and everything in it. I left my job. I kind of disconnected from a lot of the people that I was hanging out with. And my job was the last thing that I left, let me be honest, and it was only because Hawaii was one of my territories at the time, so I was going out
mhm.
there every 3 weeks for, like, a week or 2 at a time, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, this is so hard to let go of." Like, that was the one thing I was like, "God," 'cause that was my travel bug was already there, and that was, like, my
Activated,
one
yeah.
outlet. And so I'll never forget, I was in Oahu, in Honolulu, and I got a meeting invite at, like, 5 a.m. And it was from HR, and it was like 350 people on the list. And I was like, oh God, what is this? And it
Oh,
turns out they were downsizing. And so they were
wow.
creating 28 new positions that all of us could go after. Um, and I, without sounding arrogant, like I knew the Texas position would have been mine. I'd been there
Mhm.
long enough. Like I knew that. But I had this thought. I was like, you know what? I've been asking for this. I had been at this company for almost 9 years. And I was like, I
Wow.
wonder what happens if I choose to walk. And so I asked, I was like, okay, if I interview and I get the position and I say no, I decline, am I eligible for severance? And they were like, no. But if you
Oh,
don't interview at all, you're eligible for severance. And I was like, this is the
well, there
last
you
piece of
go.
the puzzle. This is literally what I asked for. Am I going to be brave enough to accept this invitation that the universe has kindly placed on my lap? And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I have no choice but to do it. And it was going to continue to pay me for the next like 6 to 8 months as though I was still working. I was like, okay,
Wow.
that's time to figure it the
Wow.
fuck out. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So the day that severance was deposited into my account, the first thing I did was book 2 trips. I booked one to Bali and one to Iceland. I wanted to get as far out of my comfort zone as humanly possible in 2 complete different directions. And I booked them through a company called Under 30 Experiences, which I had heard about through a friend. I was actually a singer-songwriter for a while, and my drummer's sister-in-law worked for Under 30. She was one of the first guides that they
Ah.
had. I know, so random. So I booked these 2 trips. I go to Bali, and it completely changes so many aspects of my life. Like, I had already
Mm.
just, burned so much of my life to the ground. And there was
Mhm.
another piece, like, I was born and raised, heavily in the Christian church, Methodist.
Mm.
Um, I was a worship leader at the time, like, the girl on stage every Sunday with a guitar and a
Oh,
band,
wow.
sing about Jesus, which, I mean, will always be a part of my upbringing and who I am. But all of that to say, there were certain aspects of that that hadn't always set fully right with me, or
Mhm.
didn't feel like fully aligned. And it was like for the first time being thrown into a culture where they couldn't have had a religious framework further from what I had known, yet were some of the most beautiful, kind, compassionate, and welcoming people. It just confirmed what I already had kind of like underlying issues with being a
Mhm.
representative in the church like that. And so when I got back from that trip, I was like, wow, like I cannot be up on stage every Sunday. So it just stripped another part of my life away that I hadn't even
Wow.
realized needed to be stripped at that point. So it's like that deconditioning process we kind of touched on at the very beginning.
Mhm.
It was like I got thrown into that without having a clue of what I was doing. And that was
Yeah.
the last piece of deconditioning that needed to be kind of stripped for me to start figuring things out. And so that felt like that was the close of that phase. And a couple months later, I went on the Iceland trip. And I will never forget coming home from that trip. I was standing in my mom's living room, just weeping, like the same type of tears that I was weeping on the kitchen floor that night. But this time, instead of knowing what I didn't want, it was like I had this moment of clarity of what I did want, or some aspects of my life that I was very clear on. And I was like, I don't know what it all looks like, but all I know is I have to travel. I have to be deeply steeped in culture. I have to meet strangers and have deep, meaningful conversations and just keep learning and keep growing. And my God, I wish that was a job, but like that's not a real job. And so I
Yeah.
just started laughing, and I just kind of left it. I left it at that. I spoke it and then was like, huh, that'd be cool. And the one thing I was clear on, I was like, okay, like I do think it would be important for me to take some steps toward designing my life around at least being able to work remotely. Right.
Mhm.
So at the time, I'd gotten my CPT to be a trainer. So I was working at a couple of gyms around Austin. And I had a friend, we were just kind of like bouncing ideas off of each other. And she was like, dude, what if you did fitness retreats? Like nobody's really doing
Mm.
that. And this was years ago. And so I was like, huh, okay, like let's freaking do it. Like let's start a website, do branding, everything. So we did. And I was like, okay, let me hop on a call with some of the founders of Under 30 Experiences and see if this is even something that I could handle. Like, let me see if they would allow me to pick their brain. And so
Mhm.
um, they did, and they had just launched their custom experiences division. And they were like, actually, we'd love to kind of pilot this program with you where we run the background and logistics for
Mm.
yoga instructors, fitness instructors. You bring your people, show up, and we take care of everything else. And I was like, that's freaking amazing. Like, let's ride.
Yeah.
Because I was already a
Yeah.
diehard Under 30 Experiences fan at that point because it had changed
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah.
So we ran that trip. And then through that experience, I brought on, a lot of other people that were wanting to do the same thing. And through that experience, I ended up, oddly enough, getting hired by Under 30 Experiences in their marketing department. Because they were like, God, we would love to bring you on full time, but like we don't really have a position for custom experiences, but we are hiring for this marketing position. But they knew me as a singer songwriter and a fitness instructor. And I was like,
Mm.
well, fun fact about me, guys, my whole life before you knew me was business and my degrees in marketing. They were like, no way. And
Perfect.
so, I mean, literally, and this has been a theme throughout my life since I was brave enough to burn everything down and be open to what felt aligned. is just being open to these breadcrumbs that have shown up along my path. And if they feel good, I'm like, oh yeah, that needs to be picked up. Even if it doesn't make sense, I'm like, there's something there that needs to be explored. And so
Mhm.
that's how I ended up at Under 30 Experiences. And so I worked there for almost 4 years. And so I started marketing, but then ended up trip leading for the majority of 2018, and then ended up heading up the custom experiences division, and then was director of communications. And so my experience there really set me up to be able to do what I'm doing now, which I didn't know at the time. I was, and I still will forever love Under 30 Experiences and everything about them. Like, that is family. I'm forever
Mhm.
grateful for everything. Still have great relationships with everyone. Um, so I got exposure to a lot of the different aspects of like the travel industry from that side. And so in 20 late 2019, I had this like internal pull. It was like September 2019, and it was like that it was time for me to do something different. And I
Mm.
was like, what? Like, I know this feeling. I know this is the feeling that's like led me to everything beautiful over the last, 4 or 5 years, but what? Like, I don't want to leave here. Why would I leave here?
Yeah.
And it was like the day that I made the decision that I needed to be open to something else. I was driving home from work that day, stopped at a stoplight because I couldn't be bothered to be bored for more than 10 seconds, open Facebook at the stoplight. And the first post that I see is from a friend that's about hiring for a position at her job. It's in tech, and it was for a technical writing position. I was like, well, that sounds boring as fuck. But is it coincidental that it just showed up in my lap right now at this very moment? Like,
Mhm.
feels like I should at least explore it without any expectation. And so, long story short, that ended up turning into a job offer that I was offered January 2020, but I was adamant about not beginning until March 2020. Just because
Mhm.
I, at that point, wore so many hats at Under 30, I wanted to make sure that everything was in order, that everybody knew where everything was before I left. I wanted there to be a buffer. Like, I was not just going
Mhm.
to flip a table and leave. I just
Yeah.
couldn't do that. And so they were willing to wait. And so I started, and the dates are important for this reason. So I
Yeah.
started that new position in tech, fully remote, making more than double what I was making at Under 30 Experiences. So now I have the means to travel by myself.
Yeah.
I accept March 2nd, 2020. 1 week after that, COVID becomes a major thing, and the international travel industry
Halt.
shuts
Yeah.
down completely. I got so many phone calls, texts, and FaceTimes that day. Like, how did you know? Like, how did you know? And I was like,
Yeah.
look, I didn't know anything. I just knew I've learned to listen to that internal nudge
Yeah.
and to follow these breadcrumbs as they come, that even if they don't make sense. And so the beautiful part of that was I evaded getting laid off essentially. And am now
Yeah.
was in a beautiful position to, be able to travel, work remotely. So COVID didn't really affect me much in that way since I was already working remotely. What did suck is that now I couldn't travel. So there were like 8 or 9 months of 2020 where, like all of us, we were stuck. And
Mhm.
so now for the first time in, 5 years at that point, yes, I was making more money, but for the first time, I was so dissociated from any kind of meaning in my job again. And for a
Mhm.
while, I felt like a freaking sellout. It was like I've given talks on flipping the table on your life, leaving your 9 to 5 and going full on into your dream. And now here I am chasing a paycheck again.
Mhm.
And I was just like, yes, I see the blessing in, having a job right now, but what the fuck? Like, I was
Yeah.
depressed because I was just like, this doesn't have any meaning. And I just spent like 8 months just feeling like a sellout, being really sad, not fully understanding where I was or why I was there. Because things were just like not going to plan. I wasn't traveling. I was freaking stuck.
Mhm.
And so once domestic travel kind of opened up a bit more, became, you weren't frowned upon for traveling.
Yeah.
Um,
I remember that. Yeah.
um, yeah. So It was probably like early October 2020 where I was like, I don't need to know the end result, but I need to know a next step. Like there has to be
Mhm.
something because I'm feeling like I was when I was stuck in my life and there has to be more meaning somewhere. And I just remember kind of like praying before I went to bed, or really more like yelling at the
The sky.
universe, guides, my roommate's cat. Like, I don't know anybody who would freaking hear me at that point. I was like, I'm not happy. Like, what's the point of any of this? Like, I don't need to know the end, but just give me the next step. Just give me the next step. And I go to bed and I wake up, like, not just wake up, I like jolt awake and I look at my phone to see what time it was because usually when that happens, it's around the 3:30 time frame.
Mm.
And just as expected, it was like 3 on the dot. And I was like, of course. And I was like, this is so annoying. And again, by habit, I go to Facebook. And the first thing I see is a story from a new friend that is about this retreat. Um, Pause, because an important thing. I had this one weekend in November saved to travel. I thought I was going to go see one of my old mentors, November 5th through
Mhm.
7th. I'd had it saved for months. The only reason I hadn't bought a ticket is at the time my mentor and his wife were splitting their time between Florida and Tennessee. And so I wasn't sure where they were going to be yet. So I hadn't bought a
Mm.
ticket. But that was the weekend I had saved to go travel. So I wake up, I see this Facebook story about this retreat, and wouldn't you believe that it's a retreat called the Remembering Retreat in Sedona, and it's
Mhm.
happening November 4th through 7th.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, oh shit. Like, I literally asked for the next step before I went to sleep. This is the one weekend I have saved to go somewhere. And this is the first thing I see when I wake up. I was like, this feels like another breadcrumb. And
Wow.
so I wake up out of bed and I just am kind of like, praying about it, and I ended up going to Barton Springs at like 4:30 a.m. just because I was like, I don't know, this feels really important, but this is a big decision. Like this is kind of a lot of money for me at the time. What do I do? And I call my mom, and she was like, "You have to go, and if you need help getting there,
Wow.
like I'll pay for you to go." And I was like,
Wow.
"I'll pay you back
Mhm.
someday. This feels
Wow.
like the move." And so I did. So I went to that retreat and met the facilitator whom I'd never met before. We immediately resonate. Like from the moment that we met, we were just like, I see you. Like, okay, you're there's something here. Um and by the end of that retreat, she of course had heard everything about me working in international travel, and she was like, we were driving to the airport on the last day, and she was like, what would it look like to take something like this internationally?
Ooh.
And I was
Wow.
like, not only does this excite every single cell in my body, but I know exactly how to do this. Like the last 4 years of my life have prepped me to know
Yeah.
exactly how to do this. I was like, give me 3 weeks to
Wow.
create a new LLC and let's ride if you're down. And so
Wow.
we tapped on human design before we started the recording. Um,
Mhm.
but it's really beautiful looking back and now the way that we operate our business now. Um, to see how it is when everybody's acting in accordance to their design. So she's a manifester. Her job
Mhm.
is to have the ideas, have the creation, and inform. She did exactly that. She had an idea. She was like, what would this look like? I and my generator self showed up for something that excited every single fiber in my being. Um, and it just grew from there. And so our whole thing from that, oh, sorry, that's how we started the Medicine Connective. that's That's the birth story of the Medicine Connective. Um, so we ran our first retreat March 2021. So we ran 3 retreats our first year with no expectation. We're just doing this because we freaking love it. And our
Mhm.
powers combined just create this really beautiful container for massive amounts of transformation in a very short amount of time. Um, and my whole thing from the beginning was I didn't ever want it to feel um, like it ever was coming from a place of scarcity. So I was like, I
Mhm.
will keep my day job for as long as it takes. And I vowed to not pay myself for the first 3 to 5 years so that everything could grow with the highest level of integrity and purity. And we can keep the main thing, which is the magic that happens on the trip, so that we're not
Mhm.
stressing out, whether 3 people or 15 people show up to the
Yeah.
trip,
Yeah.
that we believe that the right people magnetize to each experience and each hold some kind of medicine for somebody else on the trip.
Mhm.
Usually comes up in the form of triggers. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of how all of that happened. So, all of that to say, I still have my day job. So,
Okay.
I still work
Yeah.
full time, but I work fully remotely. And part of me coming over to the company that I'm at now was being very open and honest about that. Being like, look,
Mhm.
I'm not willing to bend on my lifestyle as long as
Mhm.
I can work from anywhere at any time and, do my job. Um,
Yeah.
happy to do it.
Oh
So
man.
yeah, so I still have my 9 to 5 and we run the Medicine Connective. So we're just kind of growing slowly and surely. And instead of having, because everything in me as a, business person, that's my role in everything in operations. Like I've been taught that we need to have a plan. We need to have a plan to scale. We need to have 5-year plan, 10-year plan. But I was like, what if for at least the first 5 years, instead of going that route, we nourish this almost as a child.
Mm.
And we just gave it the love and the attention and the nourishment that it needs to grow into whatever it is supposed to be. If that ends up being something big down the road, cool. If it's only meant to be this small thing, these small containers for a couple of years, that's also cool. I'm here for that. So I
Yeah.
think releasing a lot of the pressure around it having to be something and having to be a primary source of income has allowed it to grow in ways that we would have never imagined.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. Oh gosh. Okay, I have cried. I've gotten goosebumps. Like you
I
see,
just talked for like 30 minutes straight, so let me be quiet and let you ask me a question.
oh my God,
That's the
no, this
storyteller
is
coming out. That's the storyteller.
no, but it's amazing, and I've been like tears coming down as you're explaining your transformation story because I see myself in all the parts that you went through. Also, your solar return for those that are like on the woo woo
Sis,
side like us. Oh my God, your
it was
solar
hectic.
return.
My shit, everything burned. My solar return came in
Oh
hot.
my God. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
listening, you're like 20, 28, 29. I'm like, oh yeah, those are the years
Oh,
when
yeah. We were
the
in
or no,
it.
no, sorry, the
We were in it.
Saturn return. Oh my
Yes.
God, yeah. And wow, yeah, the burning everything to the ground, having the
Mhm.
courage to continue to strip away things in your life, start to let go, and only in that place of clarity, not even clarity of you know what you want, but in just like you have nothing holding you down, burdening you, taking up space in your life. That's when you
Right.
finally can see the breadcrumbs. The breadcrumbs were probably already circling around you like, hey, when do we have a chance to like get in there? It's
Totally.
like you're too full. You can't see beyond the cloud of this life, this bubble that you created. But once all that
Right.
popped, then it's like, oh wait, I could see what was outside just hovering for me.
Right.
And so
It's
it's
like the
beautiful that
experience
you, yeah.
gets to be magical.
Yeah, and I love that you continued following that even in times when those feelings of am I selling out? Am I, like getting completely saying no or turning my back on this person that loves to travel, that wants to help people with their changes, but yet I'm over here, working a corporate job. Like there's reasons for everything. And I also love the fact that like I'm in that same boat right now where it's like how do I keep this vision alive, this version alive, while also, not smothering it with the pressure, right?
Right. And so I think, and this is only because I've gone to both sides, and there is no right way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's story is going to look different. Everyone's recipe for getting to where they're
Mm-hmm.
going is going to look different. But I think, and again, kind of reverting back to what I spoke to earlier about giving talks about literally doing what both you and I have done, which is flip the
Yeah.
table on our freaking life and every bit of security and going full in
Mm-hmm.
after something. That is a way. That is a way.
Yeah.
And there's the world of and. We are
Yes.
able to also operate in the world of and, which is doing that. And if there is something else that will allow you to, without, like you said, without like squashing you or taking up too much of your time,
Mhm.
but if you can find that sweet spot of having something that allows you to maintain that level of security so that you can build what you're building from a more pure place, like hell yeah, man. Why would we say
Yeah.
no to that? Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
And I love, like, it took us a bit to reschedule this interview, but I think that I was meant to hear your message right now myself, right? Timing is everything.
Mm,
And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. I'm
mm,
like really glad I'm hearing that, because even for me, it's a very like reaffirming of like, there's different ways, there's different avenues. As long as you know where
yes.
you want to go and you're working towards that, like the path in between could be a little rocky, it could be a little up and down, it could go
Oh, it's gonna
backwards,
be,
forward.
look,
Yeah.
it's gonna be rocky and you're gonna go backwards no matter which path you decide to take, let me tell you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's Gary.
So
That's the only thing I know for sure. Shit's gonna get rocky.
yes, yes. And I love that you share all of the ups and downs and that process, because on social media you might only see like the beautiful website, or like the photos of like all of these beautiful things that you get to work on. You're like, oh my god, that's what I want. But it's like you don't get to hear the sitting at the kitchen contemplating your life and getting rid of everything, or like making, like, sitting at the stoplight and like allowing those pings to come to you and say, okay, what does it look like if I did this? So thank you for sharing that raw background, because it's very like, that's this the purpose of this podcast even, right? Like, everyone wants to have a purpose driven life, but if you're only seeing the polished after photo, then how does anyone get empowered to do all the dirty work to get there?
That's why I showed up like this today, guys. For those of you who can't see me right now, I'm no makeup, looking raggedy in a hoodie.
Raw, honest truth, full life
Here we are.
transparency.
It's just where we are. It's late. And I didn't have it in
It's
me.
the message is here. It's what's important, and I appreciate you showing up in all the ways. um I want to dive in. Oh my god, I was like typing up notes, and I'm like, okay, I want to ask that and I want to ask that, but really I think that um one of the things I really want to focus on too is what you're doing now, with your job and the transformations that you're creating, because you had all of the ups and downs and crazy things that you had to personally get rid of, bring into your life, and then now you are helping others do something similar. And you mentioned that you've kind of gone through a spiritual journey as well, with learning meditation techniques, learning human design, learning other different ways of facilitation and heart and breath work. Um, I want to understand the process that you went through in learning all of those techniques, the ones that resonated the most with you, and then
Yeah.
now the magic sauce that you help others with.
Totally. So I think jumping on the spiritual path for me started when I was leading trips for under 30 experiences and was leading trips in Bali for
Yeah.
a long time. So it was like I had this big transformation in 2016 after my trip
Hmm.
there. And then by actually the next summer, 2017, I led my first trip there, but then spent a lot of time there in 2018
Hmm.
and met several different teachers. And just for me, everything's always been led with curiosity. There's like something I'm curious about and I want to learn more, and then I just fall down a hole. um,
Hmm.
and that goes for everything. So that when it started for me studying like the spirituality of yoga, and then like Buddhist Hinduism since I was in Bali, and finding teachers around that and wanting to be a part of ceremony and ritual and understand, who we're praying to and why, and what this, ceremony is for and why. And I mean, then after being so steeped in it there, then I was like, well, I want to know this about everywhere. Like, I want to know what your rituals and spiritual practices and beliefs are all across the world. And so
Hmm.
that's what I'm doing a lot of the time in my downtime as I'm traveling, is connecting with different spiritual leaders, um, and learning as much as I possibly can. And I kind of use that same operating system of following the breadcrumbs, knowing that the right teachers will fall in my path at the right time
Mhm.
and pursuing it when they show up. And that's come in so many different forms over the last 5 years. So, um, yeah, God, I don't even know
I
where to start. It's just like
Yeah,
anywhere I am, I dive into the spirituality of that particular place.
and I love that you started
Yeah.
off. I actually just spent 4 months living in Bali because my first time was celebrating my 30th birthday in Ubud on an under 30 trip, uh,
Oh,
with Anga, right? Like, I like,
yes.
had this life-changing trip.
That's my brother, man.
Yeah, I'll link his info in the show notes because he's just an amazing soul.
Oh
And
my
just
God, what an angel.
and like getting rooted in his community and him sharing his culture and just their way of life and just the honestly like the kindness and compassion and the welcoming spirit, like it
Dude,
stuck with me.
next
Ubud,
level.
right? Yeah, and so I came back when I needed to do some more healing a few months ago and stayed for 4 months. And it's a very spiritual place. And it's just such a good place, as you said, to be curious and to
Yeah.
learn more. Every morning, they're doing ceremonies and lighting incense and giving offerings to the gods. Who are the gods? And
Mhm.
why is it that they're, because the island is blessed, the specific city, you feel the energy as soon as you walk in.
Right.
For me, it's like a tingling feeling, or you just like feel so
Totally.
nourished from the inside out. And I love that that's what started you off, because that I was like, yeah, Bali, that's the one. There's a reason.
Totally. And so that's how we kind of pick our locations now. Not to say that it's like
Mhm.
fully driven by me. Obviously, we take, suggestions into consideration when we get feedback from travelers of like where you would want to go, but we
Mhm.
usually build trips around when I'm traveling having those types of feelings. Like when I show up somewhere and I'm
Ah.
like, "Oh, it's this again. What can
Mhm.
I
You
learn
can
here?
feel it.
What could I bring other people to experience here?" And that's what a
Mhm.
lot of our trips are based on, is like deep cultural immersion and with that lens of spirituality.
I love it so much. And
Yeah.
I know you have trips. You just came back from Costa Rica. I know you do trips in Bali. You do trips in Guatemala. Where else?
Yeah,
Ireland, Iceland.
dude. Yeah, so this year, Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, which actually
Ooh,
was the second
yeah.
place that I had ever felt that feeling. Again, the
I
same
really want to
feeling
go
as in
there.
Ubud, but it's you, girl. You have to. So it's like such a spiritual vortex, but through like a Mayan lens.
Oh,
So getting to
interesting.
it's so beautiful. So yeah, so we will be there in April. We will be back in Bali in July. We'll be in Peru in August. We'll be in Ireland in September and Iceland in October, late October, early November. So
Oh,
those are the
wow.
five that we're
So,
running this year. Yeah.
and how big are the groups that you run?
Small. So we cap
Okay.
all of our groups at 15 or less, depending on the location. Like Bali, we cap at 11, just
Yeah.
because it's just certain places are it's
Mhm.
easier to have smaller groups.
Smaller
So
group.
Bali is the
That
smallest
makes
one of 11, and then we cap everything else at 15.
That makes a lot of sense. I personally, when I've gone on group tours, and I actually have only ever really done under 30 as a group tour. The rest of the time I'm solo traveling. But I like the fact that it's a small group, because once it starts to get around the 15 to 20, I don't know the people who are on the trip. Like I can only
Exactly.
really understand and meet 10 to 15. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of our work is like group sessions. So we usually have 2 to 3 workshops that occur throughout the duration of the trip. So think kind of like, so you've been on an under 30 trip. So we have all of the culture, the adventure, um,
Hmm.
but a lot of our culture is again through that lens of spirituality and like ritual and being a part of ceremony within these local communities, but also with the workshops. So we're doing group work 2 to 3 times throughout the trip, plus the daily yoga,
Oh,
breath work, meditation practices. So, and like more
I
intentional
love that.
opportunities for connection throughout the trip. Yeah. So it's like
I
under
love that you
30 with
combine
more
that.
intention on top.
Yeah, that's actually my purpose. Is I have met through this process of solo traveling for like a decade now, and full time 3 years post COVID doing the digital nomading. I have met a lot of people, and I was this person myself that's like, oh, let's just party, let's stay in a hostel, let's just go and like meet a bunch of people, and like I don't need to sleep, I just need a bed, and that's kind of the mentality. And then and then you ask yourself, like, oh, why am I lonely? Why am I burnt out? Why do I hate my life? Because you do this, and then you go back home to your life, maybe that you're surrounded with a relationship, friends, and a house and material items you don't really care for. And
Right.
then you're just like perpetually unhappy when you leave and when you come back. Like you're just kind of in distraction modes. And
Totally.
I realized this for myself, and it's in that process of change. I was like, oh my God, everyone needs to know this. It's like when you ask that question of like, why am I lonely? Why am I unhappy? It's like, well, you take that version of yourself and you brought it onto the trip, and then you just add a bunch of alcohol on it, and well, there you
And
go.
then what's
Like
the
what are you really
point?
working on? Like what's the point? And that's
Right.
the question that has haunted me. That's always the question that haunts me, is like, what's the point in life? What's the point in what you're doing? And like, it's that little whisper that keeps asking, like, what's the
Right.
point in this? And thank you for creating a beautiful space where people can have the downtime and also the support and the different tools and resources to just have these transformations and also enjoy themselves, right? It sounds like there's some aspect where
Totally.
you're traveling and you're seeing and meeting people.
Yeah, our whole thing, and it's actually our tagline is deep work and deep play. So
Oh,
it's
I
like this
love
whole human
that.
experience is equal parts deeply important and meaningful and sacred, and fleeting and silly, and we take it too fucking seriously. Like, it
Hmm.
gets to be both. It gets to be sacred and a joke. It gets to be serious and silly. Like, we don't it's all of it, right? And so
And yes.
we recognize that as well. So we'll go into very deep, beautiful, intentional conversations and come out and be absolute idiots. Like my entire
Yeah.
team, that's like a thing that's an absolute must. If you can't be an absolute idiot, just goofball and not care about what anybody else thinks, then it's not going to work because it ain't
Yeah.
that serious.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because one of the other things I noticed too as I was starting to travel was like you meet a bunch of people. But everyone, of course, when you're traveling, a lot of people are running away from themselves or having some type of like big life change that they're mulling over or about
Yeah.
to go over. So there's a lot of trauma bonding that happens, and you don't even realize that that's what's happening because you're like, oh yeah, I'll see you. And then you like end up spending like 5 days with a friend. And the only thing you're talking about is just like how miserable your lives are, or all the things that like happen and why you're on this trip. And like it just feels heavier and heavier and heavier. And like I went on these
Yeah.
uh trips and met some people, and then I remembered, I was like, when was the last time I laughed? And I couldn't remember. It had been like months since I had actually had like a fun, belly filled, carefree laugh. And that was like the point where I realized, oh my God, like I don't think we're actually friends. I think we're just each other's therapists. And this is why I feel awful every time we hang out. And it was like a
Right.
combination of the friends that I could laugh with, I could blow bubbles with and twirl into the ocean with, and have those deep meaningful conversations. Those were the ones that like made me feel alive, and I think are like the better balanced connections anyway. So amazing that you
Absolutely.
create that in your program. What are some of
Yeah.
the types, so like for example in Bali, like what are the some of the tools and resources and like things that you all do to bring about some of those transformations?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I kind of alluded to the workshop. So, we'll have workshops that align with that particular theme. So, each retreat has a theme.
Oh.
I think for Bali this year, since we're talking about Bali, is limitless joy. So, all of our
Oh.
workshops will have something to do around joy and like not putting boundaries on ourselves around joy. Um, so I have facilitators that do that part. So that's like other team. I'm like business operations and like tag team in on workshops sometimes
Yeah.
and lead things sometimes, but really that's like why they're there. Um,
Mhm.
so that, but then we do a lot of what are called like authentic relating activities. So facilitating these deep conversations. A lot of them are like paired in two. So we'll have like a broader conversation, whether it's journal prompts or things to think about, and then pair people together to talk more deeply. So while we're creating like a group container intimacy, we're also creating intimacy between individuals on the trip at the same time, and further intimacy with ourselves, because we all serve as such beautiful mirrors for each other. And we actually set the stage at opening circle during all of our retreats around, um, that it's like you're having your own individual experience and there's a group experience happening, right? So, and they're shared and people are coming at things from different perspectives, and it never fails. Like someone will always be triggered by something, whether it's spoken to or not. Like you can't be around a group of 15 people for 7 days and not have something come up where you're like, God, I wish you didn't talk as much, or like, God, this person's
Yeah.
annoying, or why is this happening? And so we offer the invitation from the jump, from opening circle, which is, if you find yourself being triggered, it's probably there for a reason. Like our whole thing is never waste a good trigger. So see if it's
Oh.
possible, if you're able to hold a mirror and be like, what is this bringing up in me? Within reason,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
no gaslighting happening here.
Yeah.
But just so further kind of tapping into that intimacy with self. And so all of the workshops are around like diving into ourselves more intimately, connecting with others more intimately, and then connecting with the container more intimately.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the thing, is like the rephrasing of the triggers of like, okay, what why is this person like, so for example, like I have had this recent thing where I've been trying to make more male friendships, male platonic
Hmm.
friendships with straight men,
Hmm.
because I have a lot of gay guy friends, but like straight
Yeah.
men.
They're
Um
safe.
yeah, exactly. Safety. That's the piece, is I didn't realize I had some underlying issues where I was protecting myself, like my body, like my mind, everything about me was protecting myself. And even the energy around me was either affirming the fact that male platonic relationships were unsafe, or not even allowing me to
Hmm.
select them. And so instead of asking, so for example, like I ended up meeting a bunch of like potential male friends that I wanted, to get to know, and but then every time, they would do something that was unsafe. It wasn't necessarily like towards me, but like, for example, I met someone and I was like, oh yeah, like I do these things about play and solo travel, what do you do? And I asked him, and he was like, oh, I made an app for sex workers. It's kind of like Uber for sex workers. And I was like, oh, don't think we can be friends. But then instead of yeah, in that situation, I then had to ask myself, okay, why did the universe send me this person, right? What work do I need to do internally in myself to attract a higher level, a level of safety in the friendships? Because I know that that's possible. I know that that's, beautifully out there, but I need to
Totally.
do some work in myself. So it's interesting that the triggers
Beautiful,
that
beautiful awareness. Yeah, it could strike so many things. Like in that situation, curiosity to get to know this person on a deeper level without assuming that it's unsafe, right? That's one thing. And
Mm-hmm.
or like if there are any hard boundaries, like learning to speak those in a loving manner.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Exactly.
always, it always comes back to us. Like rarely does it come to other. It's so rare.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many lessons, even, and just like, and so in that moment I was like, it's not about me. I could just be curious. I could just ask questions and
Ah,
understand where they're coming from. And then also make the decision in myself on whether or not I want to proceed, and then do other internal work in order to then open up my channels to receive what it is I am looking for in a friendship. So
totally.
there's levels, and I love that you in the containers, that's the other thing, the magic of the containers. When you're going into these group programs, the people that go in that group that somehow found their way that exact same time as you,
Dude.
there's a reason. There's a reason. And
Every single time the group is so meant to be. Even with
wow.
especially with the triggers. I shit you not. Like
Yeah.
there's usually one person that's highly triggered by another, but it's always serving such an important purpose, and it's always spoken to by the end of the week. It's like, damn, wow.
Wow.
Like this was so meant to be. It always is. It's not
Yeah,
us.
so
That's all I know.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh
We
my god,
just we just set we just set the stage and trust that the right people show up
and they do. They always do. Like
every time.
somehow, and you don't even realize, you're like, how did you even hear about us? And it's like, oh, and random
So
Facebook
random.
post that I saw while I was at a stoplight, maybe, right?
Sitting next to a flight, we had a girl find us, because one of our travelers sat next to her on a flight coming home from one of our trips,
Wow.
and that prompted her curiosity, and then she started traveling with us since. It's all so random and not
It
random at all.
and not exactly, and that's the beauty and that's the magic of it all. Oh my god,
Yeah.
I might have you on for another episode because I could just chat with you about all of the things forever. I
Let's
want
do
to dive
it.
into all of the different spiritual modalities as well, and like human design in
Mm,
general. I think that should be another whole
yes.
episode because that just gives you so much
Totally.
more knowledge about you and what it is that you're meant to be doing in this life.
Mhm.
But I do want to ask just a few closing questions that I ask all my guests. Um,
Yeah.
so in terms of connection, as we're chatting and like fostering these deep meaningful connections, where have you met your most meaningful connections, and what tips do you have for others that are looking for that as well as they're traveling?
Oh, man, that's a really hard one because I always come away with, like, the most beautiful friendships and connections, my god.
Hmm.
I don't think I've ever traveled somewhere and not come away with, like, one really solid either new beautiful friend or meant to be mentor in some way, shape, or
Hmm.
form, like, it always happens. Um, I think most recently for me, if anybody that's been following my journeys seen that I've spent quite a bit of time in South Africa these days, that's been like a magic point for me lately. I've thoroughly enjoyed diving more into all of the diverse culture that country has to offer. Um, Deeply rooted spiritual practices, my god. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to head over to South Africa. I also saw you were dancing. Was it Zouk, or what dance were you learning?
Oh, Kizomba. Yeah,
Kisomba.
that
Oh
was
my
a
god,
couple.
I
Yeah,
saw.
they have. Yeah, Cape has a really live dance scene, which Eric, that used to work for Under 30 Experiences, we worked together there. I don't know if you ever had him as a trip leader. He's the
Okay.
reason I even got into that because he was in South
Oh.
Africa at the same time, so we were roommates for a while we were there, and he's a big dancer. And so
Oh
we went
wow, that's
dancing one night, and
amazing.
that's where I discovered Kizomba. And I was like, "Oh my god, this is sexy!
Yeah.
Love it. Teach me more." Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it sounds like the people that have kind of come into your life, and you know, let me know if this sounds resonates with you. It's once you've done the deeper inner work to be more authentically you, it makes your energy really vibrant and super magnetic, and it makes it very clear to the other people that would resonate with that authentic you. They can see you right away, right? There's no mask, there's no filters, and when you're in a room and you walk in, it's an immediate, like, I don't even have to say hi to anyone anymore. When I walk in a room, like, the people come to me, like, somehow, some way, and if they don't come to me at that event, somehow in the next few days we will see each other, and it's always happened. And I'm wondering if
Every
that's kind of the
time.
same with you.
Every
Yeah.
single time.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the magic of the inner work is
We
in
could
being
we
you.
could have we could have a whole separate session on that and, like, the physics behind why that actually happens from, like, a frequency
Ooh.
level. Yeah. So that's the
Oh.
other thing I dive into. So, it's like all of these cultural spiritual practices, obviously, and, like, learning more from spiritual leaders across the world, and, like, your girl is a nerd. When I am
Oh, I love
home or
that.
have downtime before I go to bed, like, you wanna know what I'm doing if I'm not sending stupid memes on Instagram? I'm, like, watching YouTube videos about quantum physics and quantum mechanics and reading
Oh.
books on all of this stuff. So my, like, deepest passion and curiosity for years now is like between, like, the intersections of spirituality and science.
Yes. I love that.
And
Oh my god.
yeah,
Wow.
That's a whole nother
Yes,
episode.
definitely. Yeah, that's a whole so that's actually something I'm deeply passionate about because my background's in neuroscience and now I'm in this more spiritual realm. And I've been like, there's a link, there's something there, right? Because there's so much, even in studying neuroscience, right? Like the first thing we learned was like, yeah, we don't really know. We know the structure, we know the synapses and firings and all the things, but like cognition, how you're thinking, like, yeah, we don't really know that. So
Right.
there's this big black hole, right? And it's like, okay, well, that's where spirituality starts to fill in some of the
Right.
blanks that science does not yet have the answers for in a way that they can in the scientific way, right? Like, is there so much that has to be proven and tested? But we know it already. So
But it's
I
all
think we can.
acknowledged, right? It's in our basic formulas in standard physics, right? Like they all account
Mhm.
for that.
Yeah, writing this down, the physics of energy and connection. I
Yeah,
love it.
I would love to have a whole separate conversation on that. Eee.
Oh man, yeah. Okay, so we're diving in because I'm actually diving in. Where I'm going full in on helping women make meaningful connections while they're traveling. I've been like
Love it.
kind of trying to figure out like what is my thing, what is my thing, and I'm like this is just these pings I keep getting, and so yeah, I that's definitely stay tuned. That's going to be a future episode. um,
Awesome.
and okay, so a couple more questions in terms of what your younger self, what
Mhm.
one question do you wish you could have asked your younger self earlier at the start of your journey that may have opened and started you on and revealed more things, like coaching question,
Mm,
self-reflection question?
yeah. Um, why? Why
Mm,
do you believe what you believe? Why do you
mm,
act the way you act? Why do you react the way you react? Why do you feel the way you feel? Is it because that's what you are feeling, or is that what you've been told you should feel? Is that
mm,
because that's what you've been told you should believe? Is this how you've been modeled to act and react? So
mm,
just, I would immediately flip it on myself into self reflection, be like, whoa, is this actually me, or is this just what I've known? And
mhm.
how do I undo all of that so I can figure out who I am and how I actually do feel?
Wow. Yeah, who does that belong
Yeah,
to? We get all these voices and then separating those voices from you as a being and realizing, oh,
dude.
that's not my voice.
No,
Amazing. Yeah,
totally.
amazing question. I think that we don't ask ourselves, we don't sit enough because we're distracted with all the other things in life. We don't ever ask, why am I living this life? Why did I want to do what I'm doing now? Why did I
Because
create this?
it's hard, right? It's hard to
Hmm.
get to like it's hard to ask hard questions. It's hard to stop
Hmm.
fucking sleepwalking.
Yeah, yeah. You don't even realize you're sleepwalking sometimes.
No,
Yeah,
not until you encounter someone who maybe for the first time is asking you questions like that, right? Like I've had
yeah,
travelers that will ask simple questions like that and they'll be like, "Damn, I've actually never thought about it." And I'm like, "Welcome. Here's where we begin.
yeah, yeah. Let's
Are
sit with
are
that
you down for the
answer.
ride?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
It involves a lot of crying. Are you okay with that?
You can either smoke a bowl and go to bed or come along for the ride. Or both, whatever you're into.
Those are the two pills you gotta swallow.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, the smokable. Oh
Maybe, like I
man,
said, maybe both. I don't know. For me, it was always like to dissociate. And I was like, everything's fine. Let me just smoke. Yeah.
it could be an and equation, right?
Full that's yeah, that's totally in the world of and.
Okay, perfect. And what is one last tip that you would give to women who are traveling solo for the very first time, uh, and they're kind of hesitant, not sure if they should
Mm.
go, having some doubts? What advice would you give them?
The world is not as scary as we've been told
Mm,
that it is. Be cautious, but be curious. There is a difference between fear and actual danger.
mhm,
So, when this can go into our science talk, but when we talk about resonance, that if we're walking around all day thinking that something bad is going to happen to us, thinking that because I am a woman, I am a target to be, for someone to steal my things or to try to
Mhm.
attack me, then you're probably going to attract that into your experience.
Mhm.
And that's a whole other talk that we can go into. Um, but if you choose to go bravely and be like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to have a great day. It's going to be amazing exploring somewhere new. Again, be aware. Don't just,
Yeah.
be completely unaware when you're in a new place. But if you can go forward being brave and joyous and curious, you will have a much more beautiful experience and open yourself to being surprised and delighted by the human experience overall.
Yes. That's amazing. I 100% word for word. Don't wave your
That.
$2,000 iPhone around, right? Like that. That's not something that you might want to do on the
Maybe don't
corner
do
of the
that.
street. Yeah.
Or like
But
anywhere.
yeah,
Put it up.
anywhere in the US too, honestly, because like I
Yeah.
was living in
The
Chicago and
US is
that's
a scarier place than most other places, to be honest.
yeah, that I learned. I was like, I was backpacking, or not, no, I don't backpack so much anymore, but like, had a backpack
Same. Yeah.
in South in South America, and everyone was just so lovely and open and welcoming, and brought me in, and just I was dancing with them and making all these new friends. And yeah, I wasn't waving around my $2,000 iPhone, but like immediately as I came
Right.
back to Chicago, where I lived for a few years, I felt the energy difference, and I was being
There you go.
followed from the subway, and I just felt very unsafe, and it was like, okay, like this isn't my reality, but I just there's differences you have to be aware of.
You just touched on it perfectly. It's like once you've gone through the deconditioning process to be able to distinguish between danger and fear and to be able to fully trust your intuition, then trust it. Right? So
Hmm.
obviously like don't go to a shady place and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm so confident and cool. This is all great."
Yeah.
Like trust your instinct. Like if it feels shady, don't fucking go there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that was a beautiful example of you encountering that here,
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm all
just
for the
trusting your
plot, right?
instinct.
Like do it for the plot when it's safe and
Right,
intuitively not
within
gonna
reason.
kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Like yeah, I'll go
A
jump
plot
out
within
of
reason.
some. Yeah, plot within reason. Where at the end, the main character, aka you, survives with like a grand lesson and a beautiful
We
life.
love that
Yeah,
outcome.
yeah,
We love that.
yeah. That's
Love
that's
that
the
story.
outcome. Perfect. And okay, last question. I like to start with play, end with play. Well, how is play part of your daily life? What do you do that
Oh
feels like
my
play?
god. So much of my life feels like play. Um
Existing.
mm, Existing feels very playful these days. I think a lot of my interactions with my nearest and dearest, like all of my closest friends, it's all play. Like we FaceTime on the regular and it's just idiots, like very highly professional, highly intelligent humans. But if you caught us out of context, you'd be like, oh my God, what are they doing? There's a lot of dance, a lot of singing. Like music will always be a very beautifully playful thing for me. Um, yeah, all
Yeah.
of that. Just being a goof, man.
Dancing.
Not taking myself
Yeah.
too seriously. All of it.
I love that. And I've seen your stories you've posted about your morning dance wake ups, and I'm like, oh yeah, these are that's the people, that's the vibe.
Oh, dude, that's such a beautiful example. Yeah, my best friend and business partner in the Medicine Connective, like often will, and she's even had a baby in the last year, and she still does this. She'll like somehow get up before me in the morning and run into the room with a speaker and some dumb song and not even dancing cool. Like there is no cool dancing that happens on these morning dances. It's just the silliest shit, and it's great. And you guys should tune in if you ever get the chance.
Yes, and honestly, the best way to wake up is with dance and goofy dance. You're shaking your
Yeah,
body, you're shaking things up, and you're putting yourself in just such a beautiful vibration. So I
absolutely.
love it whenever I see those stories of you in the dances. So keep on posting those.
Gladly.
Oh, okay. Before we close, and so people can watch these stories of the beautiful fun dances. If you could tell everyone what the best way to reach you and find out more about the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so At the.medicine.connective is the company handle. So that's where you'll see a lot of the pictures and videos from our actual trips. Then my personal handle is at Dukes Lindsey, DUKESLANDSEY. That's where you'll see all of the morning dances and like the behind the scenes stuff that's
Yes.
happening during the trips, or like the silliness that's just happening in day to day life. Yeah,
Perfect. And I will link
that's the
all of
gram.
that in the show notes so people can reach out
Cool.
to you. I'll link that in the community as well on Facebook and on Instagram. You guys will see all of it because you definitely should tune in, follow, go on one of these retreats that are life changing. Because I know that people are listening. You're tuning in because you're looking for transformation, connection, and play. And Lindsey, you've put all of that beautifully together on these trips. So I love to see it. So, thank
Yeah.
you so much for sharing your story of transformation, connection, and play with us today. I'm just so grateful to have you on and catch up with you a little bit more.
Yeah, I
So
know.
thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me, and yeah, let's continue the conversation and, yeah, keep this train rolling, sis.
Yes, let's do it. Perfect. And thank you, navigators, for tuning into today's episode. I hope her story resonated with you and has inspired some type of transformation in your life as well. So, see you all in the next adventure. And there you have it, fellow navigators. If this episode has sparked a desire for your own transformative adventure, don't keep letting self doubt stand in your way. Remember, you might just be one trip away from changing your life. So, are you ready to take the leap into solo travel? If the answer is yes, I am offering 5 spots into my one-on-one confidence coaching program this month. And this will be your chance to really uncover your travel aspirations, understand what's been holding you back, and building a confidence strategy together so that you can finally get on your very first solo travel adventure and experience these transformations for yourself. Book those spots now. I'm offering free 45-minute sessions just so that we can chat and see where you're at. And that's at travelnotsescape.com/confidence. I'll see you there. Until next time, keep exploring, connecting, and playing, and safe travels, navigators.